For decades, most psychology findings came from studies of American college undergraduates, a population psychologists jokingly call weird, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. These students represent roughly 12% of the world's population, but appear in the vast majority of published psychology studies. When researchers began testing classic findings across diverse global populations, many did not replicate. The sample you study determines what you can actually claim to have discovered. Random sampling is the gold standard for ensuring that a sample accurately represents the larger population from which it is drawn. In true random sampling, every member of the population has an equal and independent chance of being selected for the study. This minimizes selection bias, the systematic over- or underrepresentation of particular subgroups, and allows researchers to generalize findings from the sample to the broader population with a known level of statistical confidence. True random sampling of large populations is expensive and logistically difficult, which is why it is rarer in practice than researchers would prefer. Convenience sampling selects participants based on their availability and accessibility rather than through a systematic random process. Psychology's classic reliance on introductory psychology students recruited from a research participation pool is a textbook example. Convenience sampling is fast, inexpensive, and practical, which is why it dominates the field, but it risks producing samples that are unrepresentative of the broader population in age, education, culture, and life experience. Findings from convenience samples require replication in more diverse samples before being treated as universal claims about human psychology. Stratified sampling divides the population into meaningful subgroups, strata, based on characteristics like age, gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status, then randomly samples from within each stratum in proportion to its size in the overall population. This ensures that important subgroups are neither over nor underrepresented, which is especially important when a study aims to compare outcomes across demographic groups, or when a minority subgroup would otherwise be too small in a simple random sample to allow meaningful analysis. Joseph Henrich, Stephen Heine, and Aaron Orenzayan's influential 2010 paper documented that psychology had built its understanding of human cognition almost entirely on a narrow, unrepresentative slice of humanity: Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic populations, overwhelmingly American undergraduates. Across measures ranging from visual perception and spatial reasoning to fairness judgments, moral reasoning, and self-concept, weird populations were frequently found to be statistical outliers compared to the rest of humanity, not representative defaults that other cultures deviate from, but one unusual configuration among many. Several psychological phenomena once considered universal have been shown through cross-cultural research to be culturally specific rather than human universals. The Muller-Lyer visual illusion, robust in Western populations, is dramatically weaker or absent in populations that grew up in environments without carpentered right angles. Individualistic self-concept, long treated as a psychological default, is far less pronounced in collectivist cultures, where the self is more relationally defined. These findings do not invalidate earlier research, but they show clearly that findings from one cultural group cannot be assumed to generalize to humanity as a whole. In response to the weird samples critique, psychology has developed large-scale collaborative infrastructure for cross-cultural replication. The Psychological Science Accelerator coordinates hundreds of labs across dozens of countries to test the same hypothesis simultaneously in dramatically more diverse samples than any single lab could recruit. These massive, distributed replication efforts have become one of the field's most important methodological reforms, allowing researchers to determine whether a finding reflects a genuine feature of human psychology or an artifact of a narrow, unrepresentative sample. Online research platforms, including Amazon Mechanical Turk and Prolific, have expanded researchers' access beyond the traditional undergraduate subject pool, recruiting more age-diverse and geographically distributed participants. However, online samples introduce their own biases. People who join research participation platforms for payment differ systematically from the general population in internet access, financial motivation, and often greater research experience, which can affect how they respond to psychological measures. No sampling method is bias-free. The The goal is understanding each method's specific limitations. Every psychological finding is only as generalizable as the sample it was drawn from. The weird samples critique fundamentally changed how psychologists read published research, asking not just whether a finding is statistically significant, but whether the sample it came from can support the broad claims being made about human nature.